My name is Sarah. I'm 16 years old. And the night my life burned down started with one sentence: why Mom didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me and said, "Pack your things. You're done here." Then came the part she was sure of. "You'll be back begging in a month." I remember standing in the doorway, my bag half zipped, waiting for someone, anyone, to stop it. Instead, my dad stepped forward. His face was cold, final. No comfort. No protection. Just rejection so absolute it slammed the door on more than the house. It slammed the door on childhood. I walked out thinking this was the end of my story. But it wasn't. Because 11 years later, on an ordinary night, my phone lit up in my hand. Call. Then another. Then dozens more. 99 missed calls. And suddenly they weren't waiting for me to beg. They were begging me to pick up before all of that. Before the missed calls, before the silence. It started with a dream I thought would save me. The letter came on a Tuesday afternoon. Thick envelope. Heavy paper. My hands were shaking when I opened it. I'd been accepted into one of the most prestigious art schools in the state. Real one. Scholarships. Professors I'd only seen online. For the first time, my future felt solid, like something I could actually hold. I clutched that letter to my chest and walked into the living room, already imagining the relief on my parents' faces. This was proof. Proof that I wasn't wasting my time. Proof that all those late nights drawing by lamplight meant something. Why Mom didn't even look up at first. When she did, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just disbelief. "You think smearing colors on a canvas is a future?" she said. Before I could answer, she reached out, grabbed the letter, and tore it in half. Then again. And again. Paper drifting to the floor like it never mattered. I stood frozen. That's when my dad spoke. He pointed at my portfolio sitting by the door, his finger sharp and accusing. "This ends now," he said. "Pre-med or you're on your own. No house. No money. No family. You choose." The room went quiet. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own thoughts. I looked at the scraps of paper on the floor. Looked at my hands, stained with charcoal and paint. Looked at the people who were supposed to protect me, and something in me snapped into place. "Then I'm on my own," I said. My dad's eyes went cold. Not angry. Worse. Final. "You'll be back begging in a month." He opened the door. Hard. The sound echoed through the house as if it was sealing something shut forever. I stepped outside into the dark street with one backpack. My sketchbook pressed tight against my chest like armor. The door slammed behind me and I didn't turn around, so I walked away, every step shaking. I made myself a promise. I swore I would rather starve than crawl back. Quick question. What time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? Because this is where everything truly began. The first night I didn't even make it far. I crashed on a friend's couch, staring at the ceiling until morning. Every time I closed my eyes I saw the same image. A girl reaching for a door that kept dissolving, hands grabbing at her from behind. Faceless, gray, ash-stained. I woke up shaking. By the end of that week, I was technically homeless, running on caffeine and fear. I went to campus anyway. The studio smelled like acrylic and turpentine, sharp and chemical and alive. I remember thinking, for the first time in my life, no one here told me art was a waste. That alone kept me standing. I scraped together what savings I had and found a tiny shared room with 2 other students. Barely enough space to stretch your arms out. My day job was a late-night diner with flickering lights and sticky floors. I painted until my fingers cramped, then scrubbed tables until sunrise. The exhaustion was brutal, but it still felt better than suffocating in that house. That's where I met him. A boy with wild curls who sat at the counter long after his coffee went cold. One night, he noticed the charcoal sketch tucked under my arm. He studied it quietly, then said, "There's anger in this. Real anger. Don't lose that." That was the first time I realized what I was doing. I wasn't just surviving, I was turning pain into fuel. The nightmares got worse before they got better. One night I woke drenched in sweat, heart racing. In the dream, my mother stood by a fireplace, calmly feeding my canvases into the flames. She was smiling. I didn't go back to sleep, I painted it instead. Every brushstroke felt like a scream I'd never been allowed to let out. A fire. A smile. The destruction done without hesitation. When I brought it into class, the room went quiet. Professors lingered longer than usual. Students whispered. "This is raw," someone said. "Who hurt you?" another asked. I just smiled thinly and kept painting. That's when the silence from home became absolute. No calls. No messages. Like I'd never existed. And then, just as midterms hit, my scholarship was suddenly withdrawn. No warning. No explanation. Just an email saying I'd forfeited my place. Someone had called the school, pretending to be me. Told them I'd quit art. There were only 2 people who would benefit from that. I didn't confront them. I didn't collapse. Took more shifts. I sketched strangers on the street for cash. I painted at 3 in the morning, hands shaking, vision blurring. Desperation pressed in from every side. But so did resolve. Would you dare walk away from everything you've ever known, even if you knew the loneliness would chew on you every night? By mid-year, the exhibition deadline loomed. I poured everything into 3 large canvases. The first showed a child offering a glowing painting to towering shadowy adults. The second showed those adults tearing it in half. The third showed the child walking away, wrapping the torn pieces around herself like armor. My mentor stood in front of them for a long time. Then he turned to me and said, "People need to see this story. It's ugly and honest. That's what good art is." I titled the series Inheritance. I didn't know it yet, but this was the first time my revenge stopped being silent and started becoming visible. Exhibition night arrived faster than I expected. The gallery buzzed with overlapping conversations and clinking glasses. Cheap wine poured into expensive shoes. Polished concrete floors reflected the lights like a stage. I stood beside my series, palms damp, trying to look like I belonged there. My phone kept vibrating in my pocket. Unknown number. Again. And again I didn't answer. There was a feeling in the room I couldn't explain, like tension pulling tight on a wire, waiting for something to snap. Then I saw her. My mother stood framed in the doorway, dressed like she was attending a corporate gala instead of a student exhibition. Perfect posture. Perfect hair. Her eyes swept the room with the same judgment and calculation I remembered from childhood. When they landed on my paintings, her face hardened. She didn't hesitate. She walked toward me in slow, deliberate steps. Conversations dipped. People shifted aside as if sensing a storm. By the time she reached my series, a small pocket of silence had formed around us. She leaned in close and hissed, "What is this?" I met her stare. "Is this how you portray us?" she continued. "As monsters. If the shoe fits," I said. Her hand shot out toward the canvas. Time stuttered. I saw my father in my mind, snapping my sketchbook in half and tossing it into the trash like it was nothing. "Don't," I said sharply. "Touching the work is against gallery rules." She froze. A semicircle had formed around us. Faces turned. Phones lifted, not recording yet but ready. My mother's expression shifted as she realized she had an audience. A brittle smile appeared, sharp and practiced. "This is what you've been doing," she said loudly now. "Painting our family drama for strangers. You should be ashamed. You're embarrassing us." I felt something settle in my chest. Solid. "You embarrassed yourself," I replied. "I'm just documenting it." A ripple went through the crowd. Before she could respond, Corey stepped forward from my side. He placed himself between us without touching either of us. "You can disagree all you want," he said evenly, "but you don't get to threaten the art." He gestured toward the canvases. "Her work is one of the strongest pieces in this gallery." People nodded. Someone murmured agreement. Another voice, loud enough to carry, said, "She's incredible." My mother's cheeks flushed an ugly red. She leaned in one last time, eyes cold. "Enjoy your little show," she snapped. "We'll see where this art gets you when you're broke and alone." Then she turned and walked out, heels striking the floor like hammers. The door thudded shut behind her. The sound echoed, too familiar, too final. But this time it didn't follow me into the dark. Something strange happened instead. People moved closer. They studied the paintings longer. Questions turned into conversations. A local blogger asked if she could feature the series. A curator mentioned a small group exhibit. Applause broke out when the awards were announced, and when Inheritance was named Most Impactful Series, it felt unreal. As people clapped, I realized something important. The humiliation she tried to throw over me like a net had slipped, landing squarely on her instead. So tell me this, when the people who are supposed to love you turn their backs, would you choose to forgive them? Or let your success slice back in their direction? Because this wasn't the end of the story, it was only the beginning of the comeback. Winning didn't make life easier. It just made the backlash louder. The cash prize barely covered 1 month of rent. And almost immediately, the emails started coming. Long, furious paragraphs accusing me of smearing the family name and using trauma as a cheap marketing trick. I read them once, then blocked the addresses. That didn't stop the calls. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. According to them, I hadn't been kicked out. I'd run away. I wasn't independent. I was sick. I wasn't succeeding. I was being manipulated by strangers who didn't care about me. One voicemail from my aunt stuck with me. "Your art is demonic," she said, like she was diagnosing a disease. I laughed so I wouldn't cry. Then one night, walking home from a late shift, a police car rolled up beside me. My stomach dropped. They said they'd received a report about a missing minor believed to be in danger. My parents had called it in. Told them I was unstable. That I needed to be brought home. Like I was property that had wandered off. I spent hours at the station answering questions under buzzing lights. Proving I was enrolled. Proving I worked. Proving I wasn't broken. One officer finally slid the paperwork across the desk. His voice was gentle when he said, "Some parents don't know when to let go. Sign. If. Sable." No threat. When I walked out into the night, my hands were shaking. Not from fear but fury. They had tried to erase me again. Tried to paint me as helpless. Unstable. Incapable of choosing my own life. That's when the decision became clear. "Then I'll paint you exactly as you are." Back in my room, I pulled out a battered notebook I'd carried since I left home. I started writing like I was confessing to a future version of myself. Every manipulation. Every threat. Every memory they tried to rewrite that I taped in old photos. My dad standing over a trash can full of torn paper. My mom mid-rip, jaw tight, eyes cold. I didn't know it then, but I was building evidence. Record. Proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. The journal became fueled. A week later I saw the flyer, a regional competition titled Truth and Consequences. Sponsored by a major gallery. The winner would receive a grant. An exposure to collectors who could change everything. I knew exactly what I was going to make. The piece was enormous. A distorted family portrait. Towering and unavoidable. My parents' faces were unmistakable. Photorealistic, sharp, but cracked like shattered porcelain. The background was a collage of places they feared. A courtroom. A hospital hallway. A foreclosure sign half buried in shadow. Not revenge fantasies. Consequences. And the foreground, a child, me, turned away from them, walking toward a glowing blank canvas. Not destruction. Possibility. I painted until my fingers ached and my vision blurred. When the doubt crept in, I reread journal entries aloud. Every word pushed me forward. Then the phone rang and my mother's voice was clipped. "We heard you caused a scene with the police. What did you tell them?" she continued. "Do you know how that makes us look?" I laughed, short and bitter. "You care a lot about how you look," I said. "Not so much about me." My father cut in. "You're still our responsibility until you're 18. Come home. We'll fix this. Drop the art nonsense." Something snapped, but not into pieces. Into focus. "No," I said. "You taught me that choices have consequences. Now it's your turn." I hung up before they could respond. My hands were shaking afterward, but not from fear. From the fierce clarity of someone who had finally chosen themselves. "Oh, tell me, if the same people who pushed you to the edge suddenly asked for forgiveness, would you give it to them? Or let them live with the fallout they created?" The weeks leading up to the competition blurred together. Paint. Coffee. Miss sleep. Repeat. I lived inside that canvas. My professor stopped by one night and stood there longer than usual. Finally he said, "This is uncomfortable to look at." Then he met my eyes. "That means it matters." A few days later my mother asked to meet. She called it, "the disaster you're about to cause." We met at a cafe near campus. She looked different. The sharp edges were still there, but they were worn down now. Deepened lines around her mouth, shoulders tight like she was bracing for impact. Her hair was pulled into a rushed bun. I almost didn't recognize her. She didn't waste time. "I saw the flyer," she said. "Your entry is online." Her fingers tightened around her cup. "Do you have any idea what that painting will do to us?" "You mean what it will do to your reputation?" I asked, her mouth opened then closed. And then she slipped. She mentioned problems at work, church, people asking questions. Later, through a cousin, I learned the rest. For years my mother had bragged about her perfect daughter. Mid-school, stability, respectability. When the truth came out, that she'd kicked me out for choosing art, things cracked. A co-worker's kid recognized her face in inheritance. Word spread. Complaints followed. She'd been quietly demoted, her perfect image had fractured. She stared into her coffee, hands trembling. "They think I'm a bad mother," she whispered. "Consequences." Leaned back. "You set fire to my dreams," I said calmly, and then got surprised when the smoke showed. Her voice wavered. "I did what I thought was best." "You wanted control," I replied. "There's a difference." For a moment the mask slipped. Not a villain. Just a tired, frightened person. "I'm sorry," she said. Barely audible. "I didn't think you'd actually leave. You told me I'd be back begging in a month." Tears welled. "I was wrong." Then the truth surfaced. "That painting," she said quickly, "will destroy whatever respect we have left. Your father's business depends on that image. Our finances." There it was, not my pain. Not the years of damage. Money. She straightened, hope flickering. "You could paint something else. Something less personal. If you pull that piece, your father and I can help you. Tuition. The scholarship. We can fix this." It sounded like safety. It felt like poisoned. I remembered ripped paintings. Standing silent while my work was destroyed. The police car pulling up beside me. "You're not trying to make this right," I said. "You're trying to rewind to a version of me that doesn't exist anymore." I met her eyes. "You are the reason my art has teeth. I'm not pulling the painting." Her face hardened. "Don't come to us when it all falls apart." Understood. You already made sure there was nowhere to come back to. Competition day arrived in a converted warehouse. High ceilings, white walls, light pouring in like judgment. Truth and consequences hung on the central wall. My piece towered over the room. Cracked parent faces loomed like broken saints in a stained glass window. Hidden details waited for those who looked closer. My father's watch splintered, my mother's necklace buried, a business plaque half swallowed by shadow. This wasn't just art, it was testimony. An email came in from my father, threatening legal action. My professor forwarded it to the organizers. Their reply was short. "Artistic expression is protected. We stand by our artists." It was the first time adults with real power stood on my side. The doors opened. Critics. Local news. Collectors. Students. People stopped. Faces shifted. "That's brutal," someone said. With admiration, a woman snapped a photo of my name tag. "Sarah Tran," she read. 16. My age landed like a second punch. Then my parents walked in, dressed like it was a gala. Recognition hit in real time. My father's confusion curdled into fury. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. They froze in front of the painting, whispers rippled outward. A journalist raised an eyebrow, and my father scanned the room, found me, our eyes locked, and in that moment, surrounded by witnesses, they stood face to face with a larger-than-life reflection of everything they tried to bury. So ask yourself, can a single apology ever erase years of being told your dreams were worthless? Or is there a point where sorry comes too late to matter? The gallery felt impossibly tense. My parents had followed me in, though they hadn't spoken since they arrived, and my father stormed up, red-faced, voice low and sharp. Take it down. Now. I stayed calm, hands clasped in front of me. No, this is slander, he hissed inches from my face. It's a painting, I said evenly. But if you want to talk about real events, I have a journal full of dates, details, and witnesses. We can take that to court if you'd like. Truth and consequences, remember. He opened his mouth, closed it again. No comeback. My mother's hand flew to her cup. Panic softened her anger. Sarah, please, we're all ready, things are bad. And she was right. That I learned later, through whispers and an embarrassed cousin, that the business was struggling. People had stopped trusting my father after rumors spread from the police incident and the online release of Inheritance. The small gallery scene I had entered was enough for word to leak. The series had traveled faster than I realized. This will ruin us, my mother whispered, voice tight. I met her eyes. You did that to yourselves. I just painted what happened. The crowd shifted. The weight of truth was tangible. Then the judges began announcing the awards. Honorable mentions. 3rd place. 2nd place. And finally the grand prize. Sarah. For a second I thought I misheard. Then applause crashed over me like a wave. The room tilted. My legs wobbled as I stepped forward. Flash bulbs popped, catching every expression, including my parents', small, tense beneath their own cracked faces. I accepted the certificate and the grant check. The crowd waited for words. I drew in a deep breath and spoke. This piece is about what happens when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who break you instead, I said, voice steady. When they care more about their image than your happiness. A hush fell. Sometimes the only way to survive is to tell the truth so loudly it drowns out their lies. To everyone who was told their dreams were a phase, a disappointment, or a waste of potential, this is for you. Applause erupted. Thunderous and electric, different than anything I had felt. It was like something inside the room had shifted, like the walls themselves were leaning in to bear witness. I stepped down, refusing to glance at my parents. I didn't need their recognition. I didn't need their apology later. The fallout began quietly but unmistakably. A local news segment labeled me the teenage artist whose parents tried to silence her truth. Calls that once came in for my father's business slowed, then stopped. My mother retreated further at work, shoulders tighter than ever. The world they had tried so hard to control started to crumble, bit by bit, under the weight of the consequences they'd spent years avoiding. I packed my supplies that night, exhausted but strangely calm. Every brush, every sketchbook, every jar of acrylic seemed lighter somehow, as if the burden of proving myself had finally been lifted. I didn't gloat. I didn't laugh. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, success wasn't just about the award or the applause. It was about proving to myself that I could survive, that I could thrive, and that my art had power beyond anyone's control. So here's the question I leave behind. When success finally finds you after years of being crushed, will you use it to heal yourself? Or to make sure those who hurt you feel every ounce of the pain they caused? I chose both. And in that choice, I finally felt free. 11 years later, I was 27. The phone on my studio wall lit up like a warning beacon. 99 missed calls that I recognized the number instantly. My parents' house line. Muted. Blocked. Unblocked just long enough to see it and ignore it. I could still hear the echo of my father's words from that night years ago. You'll be back begging in a month. On the wall behind the phone, a new painting glowed on my screen. A hyperreal depiction of the same phone, screen bright with 99 missed calls. Behind it, two desperate faces reflected in the glass. Older now, blurred but unmistakable. My gaze shifted to the window. Silhouette of a woman staring at the city. Not the phone. That woman was me. I hadn't just survived. I had built a life from it. After the competition, everything had accelerated. The grant-funded art school. Commissions followed. I taught workshops, sold prints. Galleries signed me. I wasn't just painting pretty pictures anymore. I was painting survival. Messages came from all over the world. People shared their own stories of being crushed, of being told their dreams were a phase. My art became a language for anyone who had been silenced. Meanwhile, My parents' lives unfolded like the twisted portraits I had painted as a teenager. Whispered rumors became public knowledge. Clients abandoned my father's business. Articles about the missing daughter and silenced artist went viral. Investments failed. Their house was sold to cover debts. They moved into a cramped apartment. The internet never forgets. Our hometown loved gossip. Then, years after silence had settled, the first call came. My mother's voice was smaller now, frayed at the edges. "Sarah, we're not doing well. Your father's health. We could really use your help. Just call me back, please." I didn't respond. I went to my studio instead, letting paint and canvas absorb the complicated tangle of feelings. This wasn't simple hatred anymore. It was heavier. Anger intertwined with memory. The 16-year-old me, pressed against a cold sidewalk, backpack clutched, sketchbook pressed to my chest. Ordinary Tuesday. The screen screamed again. 99 missed calls. Chest tight. Breath short. Not from fear. Not from panic. But from the weight of what picking up or not picking up would mean. I let it ring one more time. A long, deliberate pause, then finally I answered. For the first time in years, my voice carried across the line. Not pleading, not scared, not uncertain. The girl I had been, abandoned and furious, was still there in memory, fueling every stroke I had ever painted. But the woman who picked up the phone now carried something heavier. Clarity, survival, and the cold knowledge that the world had finally shifted in my favor. And in that shift, the roles had reversed completely. The desperate were no longer me. The 99 calls, once a symbol of my parents' control, had become a monument to how far I had risen, and how carefully I could measure the weight of what I allowed to touch my life. It was vindication. It was justice. But it was complicated. Because I could feel the past in my fingers, the memory of the girl I once was. And beneath the satisfaction there was something else. A tangled grief that no amount of success could erase. I looked out the window at the city lights, my hand still on the phone, and I understood fully what it meant to finally be the one holding power over the story. Silence crackled across the line for 2 seconds. Then her voice came, raw, hoarse. Background noise. Hospital monitors, faint announcements, a rhythm of urgency I hadn't heard in years. "We've been trying to reach you," she said. I tilted my head, letting the weight settle. I noticed. "What do you want?" My father's voice joined hers, weaker than I remembered. Trembling. "We need help. Medical bills. Debts. We're losing everything." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. "I lost everything at 16. We were wrong about your art," my father admitted, voice breaking. "About the way we treated you. I know it's too late to ask, but please, we're begging you." The word begging hung in the air. Heavy with irony, I sank into my chair. My mind replayed every painful memory in rapid-fire succession. The door slamming, my backpack clutched to my chest, the police station's fluorescent lights, shredded canvases, my mother's cafe tears, the attempted bribe, and then other memories, tender ones. My first solo show, a fan message from a teenager thanking me for courage, a kid holding paint-stained hands saying, "My parents hate my art too. But I'm not quitting." I walked to the window, looking out over the city I had built for myself. I built this life without you. Every canvas, every paycheck, every sleepless night. Their voices trembled now. "We know and we're sorry. Truly. Can we at least see you? Talk. Try to fix things." My eyes stung. "You want forgiveness now that you've lost everything? Would you have called if you were still in that big house?" Silence answered that I could hang up. Let them drown in the consequences of their choices. Part of me wanted to, remembering every cruel sentence, every cold dismissal. But another part, heavier, sharper, knew carrying this hatred forever would chain me to them just as tightly as obedience once had. I took a deep breath. "I'm not your safety net. I won't be your bank. I won't erase what you did. Was. Then. I also won't be the person who watches you die on principle." I outlined the plan, voice steady. "I'll have my lawyer contact the hospital about a payment plan. Through a foundation, not my name. You won't get my forgiveness just because you're scared. That has to be earned slowly, over time. And you may never fully get it." But you also won't be homeless because of me. This is not a reconciliation, I said, letting the words land. This is me choosing not to become as cruel as you were. That's it. A ragged sob traveled across the line. Thank you, Sarah, my mother whispered. I ended the call before more could be said. No applause. No dramatic closure. Just clarity. The moral wasn't revenge. It wasn't absolution. It was a recognition that justice didn't have to be merciless. That power could be wielded without cruelty. That the life I had built, pain, sweat, and art, could exist alongside restraint, mercy, and the hard-earned choice to rise above. I stepped back from the phone, letting the silence settle. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing down. I felt something far heavier, and far freer. I had survived. I had created. And at last, I had chosen exactly who I wanted to be. My hands shook as I set the phone down. A strange lightness filled my chest, like a window had been cracked open in a room that had been sealed for too long. I turned back to the painting, the one of the glowing phone, the 99 missed calls, and the woman standing at the window, staring at the city instead of the device. I picked up my brush. Carefully, almost reverently, I added a tiny new detail to her reflection. A faint outline of a door in the distance. Not fully open, not fully closed. A possibility, not a promise. I stepped back and breathed. I hadn't gone back begging in a month. Instead, 11 years later, they were begging me to pick up. And I did, but on my terms. The room was quiet, the city lights spilling across the studio floor, and I realized the power wasn't in revenge or in punishment. It was in choice. Oh, I ask you. If the people who threw you out, who watched you break and called it discipline, showed up years later with empty hands and desperate eyes, would you open the door? Or let them stand outside and feel the cold they once shoved you into? The brush hovered over canvas, and the question lingered, unanswerable for anyone but the one holding the brush.